And as you've just heard, the session's going to be recorded, so we'll have the recording available to you, not only for yourselves, but also for those that have got caught up in their work and want to join in and understand what was said before. As I said, I work at Cybrilliance. Anybody wants to know about me, go to LinkedIn. It'll take you ages to get to the bottom of my page because the grey lines I've got on my face are for age. I've been doing and working in this industry since 1984. Now, the reason I tell you that is that everything that I'm going to talk to you, I've actually endured, experienced, ever since I got into computers as a trainee computer operator. So what I'm going to talk to you about is the reality of what's going on. And to give you some context to that, I worked at a company called Storage Tech. So I launched what was the first ever dual reel 5x4x1 cartridge, tape cartridge, when I lived in Colorado. I also helped to launch the first robotic libraries the Storage Tech brought out. So I've worked in storage a lot. At Symantec, I launched the first endpoint protection platforms and also the first DLP product called Vontu that's in place for security. I was around when John McAfee, Pete Norton, and Eugene Kaspersky introduced the first antivirus systems that came along. I've also written papers when I was an IDC research director for security software, and what I've allowed to do then is then go on and help out startups in things like blockchain data management, and also endeavoring to look at researching new technologies. So I'm not doing this from a marketing side of things. This is reality. Everything that I'm going to show you today is what's happened over the last 40 years and why it's relevant to what you do today. So the whole thing around today's session is why we believe that adequate data resilience, or I believe, has not kept pace in the backup and recovery plans. When I worked at Symantec, I looked after the net backup products as well as the backup exec products, so I know the space very well. And the reason why it's not kept pace is that everything else has continued and moved forwards. Because as we were mentioning right at the beginning about Einstein, doing the same thing produces the same results, even though the things that can go wrong have changed, and you're not taking account for those in everything we do. I know there are people here based in different countries where, the minute they get attacked by malware, the first thing they do is look at their existing tools, throw them out, put new ones in, or increase the complexity of them rather than looking at different ways to do things. And when you look at what possibly could go wrong, you have three areas. The first two that come up, first of all, is the acts of God. This is where an individual's not involved. These are the sort of things that originally came along where you've got fire, flood, earthquakes, things like that happen, and how they've affected people's operations in the past. You also have the internal unplanned failures. So a lot of people sit and go, oh yeah, great, we know all about these, but you have to take notice of them. So unplanned failures is where a human could be involved with the activities that you've done that's going on there, and could cause your system to go either into total meltdown or some of your systems to be affected by that. So what you do to, or did in the past to manage these environments, is that you built a disaster recovery plan. Well, in the 80s and 90s, as I said, I lived through this. You were dealing with things called mainframes. The top left-hand side one is a Amdahl mainframe, and then the next one's an IBM one. And then you have disk drives, you have tape systems and robotic tape systems. All of these existed, and people moved from centralized to decentralized distributed systems that were available because they worked out a bit like electricity in the US many years ago when everything was centralized. And then they suddenly realized, hey, no, if we put different hubs in around the world, like New York and Chicago and the West Coast, we can serve our customers better. And they did the same with computing. And that's where distributed systems came in over mainframes. And you had AS400s, PDP systems and such like that existed. But also in that, you had backup. Now, in those days, there were two main leaders. One was IBM with their Tivoli management system. The other one was CA or UCC, if anybody remembers that as well. CA is now part of Broadcom. And you had full and image types of backups. You had full copies, and you took images for bare metal restores. I can remember doing these. And within those, you would then keep on site different retention versions of those copies that you put into place. And then on top of that, you would put in offsite. And offsite in the old days was tape. That's what offsite was. And you moved the tape to an offsite location using a thing called TAM, the truck access method. You would have a truck come and pick up your reels of tape and your 5x4 square tapes and take them off and locate them in a secondary site or in somewhere like SunGuard that existed at that point as a disaster recovery site. Or you went to Sun themselves, and you had mobile systems. But you would have an exact image. So you'd have the same every day. Somebody will come along and take stuff away from you in different versions. I can remember doing these. This is the way that you manage to deal with fire, flood, and earthquakes, and how you deal with internal issues, flooding from burst pipes. A system goes down, you would recover. That's what disaster recovery was all about. It was about business continuity. You moved a site from one area and then you brought it back up to a different area. And then the millennium started. And yes, I lived through the millennium bug that never existed. That every vendor in the world at the time earned a lot of money by doubling up on everything because they were worried about what was going to happen to the clocks when it turned midnight on year 2000. And what really happened was cyber attacks started. By the way, when I worked with end user computing, whether it's vector processors, IMDALs and IBMs and such like, in the 80s and early 90s, I never had a product called security in any of my operations. Didn't exist. There was some AV, which is where John McAfee and some of the other guys started to come in, but it was a choice to do that. We didn't have the world in there that we have today. Remember, disaster recovery and business continuity relied on the backup and recovery copies of data that we took off site. But when cyber attacks changed, things changed in our world. These are some of the early ones. Stuxnet is in there. Everyone knows about that one. And coming up to date, we have a lot of solar winds and stuff like that going on. It's part of our life. But it also meant that the infrastructure changed. And it changed in such a way that said, what you need to do is now go harder and faster than just using antivirus that just sat on a device. And remember, in those days, right at the early points, Windows was just starting to grow in 95. If anybody watched Bill Gates's recent interviews he's done, was 95 was the key one. But before then, you lived on, like say, DEC systems, AS400 systems, RS6000 systems. So what needed to happen is suddenly all these vendors popped up saying, we need to build firewalls, to protect your environment. But we also need to make sure that environments are safe inside the infrastructure. So I want network security, looking at lateral as well as vertical attacks that move through. And then we have this email thing. Suddenly everything came up where we could start to communicate through an email systems, and the attackers started using those. So we built those systems in there. And then we had the endpoints, the Macs, the Microsoft machines that were out there. And we needed what was at the originally antivirus. Then it turned into endpoint protection, and now it is endpoint detection and response. All of these were built into the system. But you then said, what happens when it gets through? Well, nothing. Because once you got through, I could then compromise your data. And in your recovery processes that you've got, I could also go and compromise your offsite systems or your backups that are in there. And the reason they could do that, as we showed, is that what happened is that post-2000, disaster recovery changed because we introduced cyber attacks and data loss into it. People on the criminal side realized that actually data was something people were willing to pay for. And that's the sort of thing that they saw, well, we can not only hold the environment, customer to ransom, but we can get money off of them. So things had to change. So storage changed. No longer have you got round brown spinning, you've now got arrays of disks, whether or not they're flash arrays, RAID arrays, stuff like this. You had cloud storage. You've still got tape drives, but then you had this other thing called immutable storage. I want the ability to store it so nobody can touch it. And these are great things to have in place. But we needed to move on from IBM and CA. And we did, because suddenly all of these backup recovery vendors appeared. A lot of them from the original TSM and CA1, CA7 types of systems. And they started providing the ability for organizations to do things differently because we needed to. So we not only have full backups, but we then went with incrementals, differentials, and a thing called snapshots. People will know it as VSCs to the system. But also, we needed to change the way things did. And the way it changed was the backup copies suddenly became a little bit more thoughtful in the 3-2-1 strategy, or if Veeam's involved, it's 3-2-1-1. Now, all of this started from a photographer many, many years ago who decided, I want to keep multiple copies of my pictures I take so that if I lose one, I've still got another one free. And that's where this came from. And the 3-2-1 was managing a situation where you had 3 copies of data, 2 on different types of media and 1 off-site. Now, that is a lot easier to deal with than somebody like EMC in the times. They used to have a thing called Symmetrics as a disk subsystem that they used to tell people to keep 8 copies of data. I don't think it was actually about their operations. It was more about EMC selling stuff at the time. But also with that, the retention changed. And you worked out that on site, you would have full backups, you'd have incrementals and differentials. You still needed the ability to get back to any point in time that you would have, so that whether it's quarterly, monthly, weekly, that you're working to. But you also wanted to go offsite as well. And the key part with having the offsite is the offsite was now dealt with differently. As much as you still had tape, I also had these other things that were going on as well. And alongside this, I had snapshots. I could take 64 volume shadow copies of my data at any point. So, anybody made a delta change, I could deal with those. And then you had the immutable and air-gapped versions. This aligns to the 321 policy you have. And what changed with all of this is the world of the network suddenly arrived. I no longer needed truck access method. I could now use internal and external networks. And what they would do is allow me to store the data in secondary sites, which is excellent. Yeah, I've got my on-site, I've got my off-site on normal media, but I've also got a version that nobody, whether they're an attacker or just a normal employee, can change the data. It's a bit like blockchain technology, just to add to it as it goes through. And these things, people wanted air gaps, so there's no network connection that exists on there, or it was immutable. Now, the reality of recovery in 2025 is slightly different. The key thing about all of this is when you look at detection and protection from the outset, what you have to start with is a environment that's covered by a network, and you've got attackers. And as I've mentioned, you have all these different types of protection, security tools. That should always be the first line of defense. So the world of the CrowdStrikes, the SentinelOnes, people like that, the Fortinets out there, the Ciscos, the Vectras out there dealing with things, so, and all of those together is what makes up a security stack. That is always the first line of defense and should always be there. Why? Because it stops the majority of attacks getting through. Wherever they're trying to get through in your infrastructure, they're protecting your devices and they're protecting all of the data and the critical services that you run. Remember, as I said, when I started on computers, AV would have been alarming to me to hear that somebody was trying to attack my systems. My system was more about how do I keep it up and get all of the processes run. So things changed over time, but also what you had is that capability to rebuild and restore, because that's what you wanted. And you take that 3-2-1 strategy and you started to make copies of data. So whatever the data type was, you had your on-site versions, you had your off-site versions, and immutable. But you also kept hot and cold standbys of devices and flexible storage available to you just in case. It's a bit like I say to people, why do you buy insurance? Well, you buy insurance just in case. Well, that's what you put a lot of this in place for. And also, you have things like clean rooms. A lot of the backup and recovery vendors talk about establishing a clean room environment where you can store and recover your data. And that combined creates your first line of recovery. That is what people talk about. When I say to them, if you got attacked, could you get your data back? And they say, yes, I can. And you say, how? Well, I have a 3-2-1 policy. I've got access to a clean room environment. I have immutables, and I've got spare devices that are there and storage capability. And I say, great. So let's continue, because we'll come back to things as we go through this. I am one that does not like sensational headlines that are out there. It feels column inches, and it really annoys me. So I thought, let me find some things that are really relevant to you that come out in the market. So all of these, by the way, you can find where they come from.
Alessa?
All of these, by the way, you can go and find the sources from that are in place. So I give you all the proof points for it. So apparently, the average cost of ransomware attack was 1.82 million, which is really nice if it was on my payslip, but it's not. Believe it or not, the actual number that I've seen published from what I would call valid research organizations is between $46,000 and 4.8 million. And I always say to people, when somebody says, like, my enterprise risk team want to know what the exposure would be to me if I lost the data and I've got to recover, and I say, do your own math. And if you can't do your math, then you've not done your job, because you need to be able to understand what the possible areas are. Also, the average ransom fee apparently was 2.6 million to restore lost data. Although in the same proof point, they said that you can reduce it to 1.6 million by using backups. That's really interesting, because every backup and recovery vendor I see say they're an anti-ransomware solution. So if they're anti-ransomware, why am I still paying out $1.6 million? Yeah, that is there. That you've got that, or you're going to find $1 million in the budget to pay for it. And then people say, yeah, but I've got cyber insurance, so I'm okay. Just hold that thought for later in the presentation, because I actually have reality of what cyber insurance will pay out, and that's from the CEO of a cyber insurance company. The other thing is that people will worry you by saying that a ransomware attack will occur every 2 seconds by 2031. First of all, Cybersecurity Ventures is a publication. It's a paid-for publication. It's not a research organization that goes out there. So they're there to do headlines, probably on behalf of a vendor that wants to do this. Actually, you are hit by malware something like every 0.2 of a second already. The fact is, ransomware is just growing by 2 seconds, is just a number that's picked out the air. So hopefully Cybersecurity Ventures will give me the lottery numbers so that I can win that by 2030, but it probably won't. So the other thing is, Veeam, Commvault and Cohesity, which is now the new Cohesity Veritas Net Backup organization, offer an all-in-one anti-ransomware solutions that are both efficient and secure. Their words, not mine. The only way you can really protect against ransomware reactively using immutable vault or encryption technologies. No backup and recovery vendor can ever stop a ransomware attack. They can only manage to stop an attacker from compromising a copy of your data because it's on immutable. And by the way, immutable storage in most cases is not the backup and recovery vendor's technology. It's by these others, Wasabi Object First, Pure Storage, who make that technology. So actually all they're doing is pointing your data at somebody else's hardware that is in place. So Veeam, Commvault and Cohesity, and by the way, I have friends at all of these companies. They know my views on this is stop teaching people the wrong thing. Tell them what you do, but don't tell them what you think you can do for them when it's not real. The last one on this about irrelevance is an interesting one. Numbers are always there. So 2022 saw nearly 237 million ransomware attacks worldwide. I actually went to the site. It's Statista. That is normally really good. So somebody has gone in and said, actually, there is no half-year number. There's a full-year number. So let's take an average to give somebody something that thinks that's what we're going to do. Now, how many of you have ever seen or heard of attackers all getting together and working out a campaign plan for the year, a bit like a marketing campaign? It's not balanced. It's peaks and troughs. 2022 was really key because it was just after COVID, and the attackers there. Some of it was coming down, some was still starting to grow because of the issue. The key relevance of all of these, but unfortunately it doesn't sell newspapers or online print, is that criminals are deploying greater ransomware technologies. So that's what it is. It's a bit like a conversation I had many years ago with a guy called John Kindervag. John was the person, the analyst, that introduced Zero Trust at Forrester. And I said to him, why didn't you call it Always Verify? And he said, because my bosses, my management said it wasn't sexy enough and wouldn't sell. So we called it Zero Trust instead. Tell me what it does. Yeah, don't give me some elaborate stuff around it. So why should you think about things that are relevant to you in the industry about what you hear for security? So first of all, 90% of ransomware attacks do not result in any loss. Yeah. So the fact is you could get hit every 2 seconds by 2031 is irrelevant. And the reason for it is that all of the attacks that happen, 10% of them may get through. Still a large number, but it's not 100%. So the 90% is down to that stuff I talked about earlier. Endpoint detection, network detection, firewalls, email security, all of those things that you invest a lot of money, and people try to convince the board that security is a cost of doing business, not a cost to the business. Yeah, and down to people. Gut instinct helps to find this. Yeah, so that's what you have. Also, when people tell me, by the way, I've got a backup recovery strategy and I've got instant response, instant recovery, why are people like IBM, through their data breach report, talking about the fact that ransomware takes 49 days longer? Now, 49 days is 49 days longer than instant, than the average to identify and contain. That's finding it. Yeah, let alone stopping it and working it, it's finding it. So, yeah, again, what happened to the backup recovery people who said, oh, I can give you this straight away? You know, you've got Commvault, well, we can go into and put a clean room situation, and you've got Rubrik who said, yeah, but we just use our own racks that's got our own OS, so nobody can compromise our systems. So if that all happened, why is the reality for a cost of breach so much? But when you look at each of these areas over, and up to the latest 2024, you're finding this is where that $4.88 million for an average cost of a data breach. Remember, ransomware will include data breach in it. It's not only about encrypting and deleting, but it's also about exfiltrating the data, that you could have going on in the system. And when you think about that, the key thing about breaches is that people, when they do tabletop exercises, know what they're testing. How do you know it if you've been breached if nobody tells you? Yeah. If you look at the bottom line, it talks about 4.55. That is the security teams and their tools, all those EDR and NDR tools and threat intelligence tools, identifying that you've been breached. The top two are saying you didn't know about this. Remember, people talk about 45, 90 days until you realize that you've been breached or your data is sitting on a nameless site somewhere. When you look at the time to identify and contain the breach that is happening, remember, keep in the back of your head, I've got security tools, they've just failed. I've got backup recovery tools. Wait a minute, if I'm doing instant or reasonably instant recovery time, why do I have days that are looking at 289, 320, 241? These are all from IBM. And the only reason I say that I endorse this is the IBM data breach report is actually users who feed into it, same as Verizon report as well. This is not somebody doing a closed question research to somebody. The last thing on this, people tell you, yeah, but I've got AI. That's, we'll leave that one, even though I just read about Elon Musk and his bid to buy ChatGPT. You've got AI and automation in there, which means I've got all the XDR tools, I've got SIM tools, SOAR tools to identify this, and I've got automated recovery tools. So what? When you've got extensive use of those, this is still saying the average mean time to identify and mean time to contain are still sizable. Even if you just worked on 51 days to contain it, and you've identified up front that you know the event happened, when you work out, that's just over 7 weeks that it's taken you to deal with that. And this, my issue with all of this is when you say to people, I can recover because I've got a backup recovery strategy, you start showing them the reality of what's going on. And when the report was done for IBM, there were people still recovering from a process. And there are people there that are saying it's taken longer than 150 days, 35% of them. You know, there's only 3% on the right-hand side that when you look at it, that is on there is less than 50 days to actually recover. It just shows what goes on. So when people say, yeah, I can sleep at night because I got a bulletproof recovery strategy, do you think you are still secure? So when we go back to our diagram, this simplistic diagram that a lot of people work on that you have, and then you get attacked. And this is what happens is the attacker evades your security tools. They then go in and start compromising both your live data and your backup data. So I've already attacked your backups and your VSCs. By the way, with VS Admin, I can compromise your virtual shadow copies literally so easy, it's ridiculous. Which means now my 3-2-1 strategy is a waste of money because it never built for cyber attacks. Backups were built for disaster recovery and business continuity, where you control it. It wasn't built for you to create multiple copies of data that could be eradicated and unusable. What you're ended up with is one copy, your offsite immutable backup, and it's got to be offsite because don't forget that acts of God that was on the first slide that you had, you don't put on site because if somebody tumbled your building, you've got no operation. So you keep it off site, which is where it should be. And you've got access now, but your recovery capability is compromised. Yeah, this is what happens. And I hear it. I've spoken to CISOs and CIOs that have that. So when you work in this environment, you then have to think about who's involved. Backup recovery and security is 2 teams, but it's not. When you go through these type of incidents, you've got to think about who is critical and should be involved in all of this. That's why technology, IT, whether it's IT, OT, IoT, is not simple anymore. When you get attacked, you have all of these areas that could be things that you've got to deal with, because whether you're taking funds from the system on a business email compromise that has gone on, your reputational damage, and that doesn't include stock, your stock market, that recovers, but it's customers, that really do come in and say, should I work with you again? Should I go somewhere else? You've got operational disruption and a big one, which is legal. If you look at what's going on in Paris at the moment, where there's a big AI conference going on, and JD Vance, who's the vice president for the US, has turned around and said, he thinks that AI shouldn't be regulated to the levels that the EU is looking at, because it will break away the freedom. But AI, if it's left unchecked, will create all of these legal and regulatory issues for data and data privacy and the way that it's used. Ask anybody that uses ChatGPT, or if you use any type of system like that at the moment, if you can put your customer data, i.e. your business data in there. And then you have national security risks if you work for critical national infrastructure. Yeah, all of these sort of things. So WannaCry, I always talk about, took down hospitals that were existing there. Yeah, if you look at all the things that happen, farming's there. People go, well, how can you damage farming? Well, if in the US, there's about 3 or 4 main fertilizer plants that actually create it. And if you change the mix, you could kill the whole of the farmland in the US overnight. You've contaminated it by putting things in there that shouldn't be. That's why, they have SCADA systems and such like in place. So when people tell me I do tabletop exercises for recovery that mimic the reality, I wanted to double check what they really meant. So what I did is I started working on a timeline. When you do your daily backups, because that's what you're doing and saying, that's my silver bullet, my golden bullet, that's going to save me. There is a piece of elapsed time between an attack happening and daily backup. That could be anything up to 23 hours, 59 minutes since the last one that was taken. So you've now got a period of no coverage. And people say, yeah, but I've got VSCs in place, or I might do immutables. It's complicated in the fact that, if you're using the last backup, then you've got to apply incrementals and stuff to it. It takes time. Please remember one thing about all of this. This is happening when chaos happens. This is not happening as a side exercise while you're also running your business. Your business at this point is down. When you get that alert, and let's assume you know about it on day one, but as the graphs have shown before, 2/3 of people don't know the attacks happen until either third party tells them or the attacker tells them. So you've now got to go through these processes. Keep in mind, you will take your networks down. You will contain the attack. You will stop it spreading internally and to your supply chain, everything that's going on. You will then get your blue teams involved or your retainer IR team. You will start locating the malware. You'll be looking to patch any ingress points that is there and remove the malware. Remember, a lot of these things are all happening at the same time. That's why there's overlap. It doesn't happen one after the other. As long as you've got enough staff, and by the way, this could happen at Sunday, 4 o'clock in the morning, Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or during your lunch hour on a Tuesday. It doesn't matter. We're dealing in hours now. So now you're going to identify the areas of compromise that you've got to deal with. Everything you've got. Remember, when you get hit by malware, they are not playing with you. They are attacking you. Their intent is to do you damage. You need, once you've understood all the areas that you've gone on and you've removed the data, and I'm being nice here, just over 8 hours, 9 hours in, you get authorization from your legal team and data privacy teams that you can start to restore. Notice it doesn't say CIO or CISO. Your legal team are the people that are trying to look after your business and saying, I've also got to protect cyber insurance claims. I've got to make sure from brand and reputation. And at that point, you can start to build your recovery tasks. Yeah, not before then. Yeah, it doesn't happen instantly. This is the instant. You start to build them. And at that point, the CIO and CISO says, okay, you can start them off. Remember, at this point, that is your minimum active data loss window. All the time up to then, when you starting to recover back, you could have data still going out of your system that is in place because you've not identified the command control paths that they've used. You're now starting to change things in the system. Then you get your networks back, but it's minimal networks. Remember, you could be using 10 gigabit Ethernet, but when you're doing a recovery, you might be down to 100 megabit for sustained. because you're sharing it with other people who want to do other tasks. Data is not their priority. There are other things that need to happen. So you will get some network back, and then you'll start to recover your critical systems. You will then start to rebuild or replace compromised servers and devices. Remember, you've got some sitting around because you had some. If you haven't, you've got to buy them in. But let's say they're sitting around. You're already at 1 day at this point. Then you start to recover and rebuild the critical data that is in place, all the different pieces that you have, and you hit a hourly number, which is the 72-hour data breach notification period. That means you need to disclose to your authority body exactly what has just happened. If you don't, you get fined. And I'll show you on a slide in a minute where that happens. You can then re-establish partial external services. Remember, you're about getting the services out to organizations, and you're working on the days. You're nearly up to a week, and now you're going to start to recover and rebuild all of your data. 1 terabyte of data takes 2 hours to recover. Yeah, anybody tells you it's any faster, try it. Yeah, it doesn't take the same recovery as it does to actually back it up, because again, you're not using the same sustained. Now, all of this looks nice. This is activity, but the other thing that's going on at the same time is you're getting hit with costs, and these costs accumulate. Now, these costs I built using a number, and the number is $2,800 per hour. Now, if you look at the numbers involved on this and you think, wow, if we get up to 4 days, 7 days, remember I talked to you about 7 weeks, even for some of it, that was close to 3 million. The average cost per hour for a data breach is $53,000. That's what's published. I've used 2,800. So the reality is a lot larger, but I don't want to scare you, or I should, but I don't. But it just goes to show what happens. And by the way, if anyone's calculating and says, well, that doesn't equal that, there are different periods during that elapsed time where you will not accumulate the same amount of loss. So it goes down, goes up, goes down, depending on what is happening over time. That's why I was a research analyst. So the key thing for you is, even though I've shown you these numbers, the fact is that you can't at this moment go to the CFO and hope he's in a good mood or she's in a good mood, because you don't really know what the number is you need. Because everything I've spoken about is you using your strategy as you've been told by your backup recovery vendor and what it says inside the NIST guides, inside the NCSC guides, inside the national, the American firm that's out there. They're out of date. Sorry, but they're out of date. They all still say, make sure you keep 3 copies of data, 2 should be on different media types, 1 should be offsite. Wow, great. Yeah. And somebody said to me, so why doesn't Gartner and Forrester and IDC change the way that recovery should be articulated and reported on? And I said, because they will lose revenue, because some of their biggest revenue attraction is through the backup recovery vendors. So they're going to say nice things about them, not, by the way, you need to look at this differently. So if you take my scenario that is going on, and by the way, this is real, go to Veeam, go to Commvault, go to Cohesity now, and they will talk about the fact that ransomware will attack your backup copies that are not on immutable. That's why they tell you to put 1 on immutable. Well, why create the first 2 in the first place if you know that they're going to be useless to you? The key thing for this is you have your immutable on the right, and what you need to do now is get and recover those either to your data center for your devices and databases, or to your clean room situation. You don't keep a clean room full of data. It costs you money. So you want the ability to move it. But the problem that you've got is this. Your networks have been taken down. You have no connection between anything and the outside world. So you cannot talk from the immutable to the other sites. At this point, you now need to worry about, do I pay the ransom? How do I get access to the immutables? You know, if I'm using AWS, for instance, I need to pay them because they're the only vendor, by the way, that makes you pay for recovery. I've got to ask for more bandwidth to be put into place and bring those networks up. But I've still got to be careful about what I do. And when you look at things like that, it comes back to that time to recover. That's what all of this is, comes through. So the reality is, when somebody says, I've just lost my backups, but I can get it back from immutable, the reason why average time to recover is it's not that simple. You don't have the people, you don't have the networks, you don't have the resources to do that. And it takes time to recover it. And there are people on this call I know that I've got and know organizations close to them that are recovering their systems a year out, and they continue to get hit because they're not changing it. So when you look at it and people say to me about cyber insurance, and by the way, it's not an area I'm versed in, but Kirsten Bay, who's the founder and CEO at CISsurance, and by the way, CISsurance underpin everything from Arctic Fox, shall I say Arctic Wolf? Arctic Fox was a product I had years ago. Arctic Wolf, Sentinel One, who else have they got? They've got some others that are out there. So they underpin all their MDR services that they provide. This is the reality of what goes on when you get hit by ransomware. So the grand total of costs was 2.6 million. If you look on the left-hand side, just next to it, it says ransomware demand was 500,000, and they negotiated that down from 750,000, that you had in place. So they paid the ransomware, but their stores were still down for 7 days, and they lost 1.2 million in revenue. So you look at these. The other second one is that 100,000 for delayed breach notifications. Notice that 72-hour thing that I put up where you've got to notify. A lot of people get fined for it, not because they can't find the data, or can't breach on it, it is they can't find the data that they're trying to get to. And when you work out, that cost alone was $1.4 million. That firm, it's a retail organization, had to find. So where was this instant recovery, I've got it all covered, that is in place? What I say to people is you need to get off your cyclic strategy. In other words, do what you've always done. Go back and look at it again. You've got to change it because recovery has changed, protection's changed, but people's attitude hasn't. So it doesn't need to be the way that IBM research shows. So when you want this system that is exactly as I shown it before, your networks are down. You don't have access to any of your security tools because they've already been evaded. But what I want is the ability to get my data back without having to move data transfers across networks using backups that are in place. But I want to guarantee that my users, as well as IT support staff, can remove the effects of this ransomware attack without endangering the devices. Your live data would never be compromised. Remember, backup and recovery is about protecting the copies, not the live data. I want to protect against deletion and encryption that is in place, and I want to escalate down my recovery time into minutes and hours, not days, weeks, and months, or even years in some cases. And for doing that, I want to make sure that I can get all my devices back up, as well as all the data back into the system again. And I mean everything that is in place. So what I'm asking is, and I'm wondering whether anybody would be willing to take me up. If I can guarantee that when I infect my device with WannaCry malware, and yes, I have it on the device I'm talking to you from, that all my files will be protected and I can recover 1,000 files faster than you can make a single cup of coffee, that is in place. And there's nothing free as a free breakfast, lunch. I'll agree to giving you a full demo of the product and how this product, New Shield, that I endorse and I stand behind, and will guarantee to you it can do everything I tell it to, will benefit your IR response and costs. So if you want to see how it works, watch this screen, because I'm now going to stop my presentation here, and hopefully if my mouse wakes up in a second, there it goes, you can now see a big screen that is on place. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a different screen with you. So this now should mean you can see my desktop. A nice picture, don't know what it is. Microsoft give me these for nothing as a user. Let's learn about it. It's a castle in Germany. Lovely. Great. So let's do something here. I have a normal desktop. This system is running a Windows 11. It's an i7 processor, and I've got a terabyte capable of storage available to it. I have a number of folders, just like anybody else would. Yeah, everything that I'm going to do now is something that your users can do or your IT support can do. That's the only time this product needs a network connection, is to send a command, never data. Everything that I'm going to do, the data exists on my device. Yeah, it's always been there. It never leaves the device that is in place. I do not need to use backup and recovery tools to do what I want. If I look at something like, let's look at this folder here. If I hover over it, tells you that I have 265 megabytes of data that exists in this, and it's got lots and lots of folders, and it's got lots of data that exists within it as well. If I looked at that and thought, right, fine, let's see a bit more about the properties that I've got 43 files in that. That's fine. Let's find something that's a bit bigger. This is backup files that we've got in there. And what I want to do is have a look at the properties. Oh, look, I got 1,256 files in there. There's a reason why this one's sitting next to it. Is this is a folder that in there has 1,004, or there's 1,406 in the total one, actually. So this one should show that there's about 150 files in it. But the difference is this one's got 61.8 gigabytes worth of data in it. This one only has 137 megabytes. So this is 1,200 files. This is 150 files. I'm not bothered about how many files or the size of files that I can protect. And what I'm going to do, first of all, is open up this. This is WannaCry 2. As I mentioned to you before, WannaCry 2 is actually a version of malware that took out the NHS systems 7-8 years ago, and damaged people's healthcare systems that they had. And it caused massive amount of disruption around the world that is in place. And what you can see if I open up this file is that you will start to see certain files being encrypted. You will see this new encrypt and new encrypt. This is what encryption does when it's bad. Yeah, it will go through your system and add the suffix on the end that means that you cannot open any of the data that is in there. If I look at these four backup files, you'll see these are all encrypted, that's in place. If I attempt to open it up, it won't let me. If I use Notepad to do that, let's see if it'll allow me to open this up. It just says you're encrypted. That's what this does when you work into the system that you've got. So this is encrypted. I do not apologize for it taking about 2 minutes to encrypt the data, because this is reality. This is what goes on behind the scenes. You wouldn't know this is going on while it's doing its activity unless somebody told you, or one of your users suddenly said, wait a minute, I'm having a problem opening a file up. Remember, it's still doing this, and it's doing this to every single device that you might have on your system. And while it's going through and dealing with all of this, you are either oblivious to it, or you've tried to raise an IT support ticket because nobody will answer your support calls that are going on through the system. And as I mentioned, if I look at these different files that are in here for the backup files that I've got, all of these have been encrypted that's going through. WannaCry, by the way, is an encrypt in place technology. So it opens the file up, and once it's opened the file up, it then encrypts it again. So if you look at all of these that is going on, it's opening these files up and then encrypting every single one of them, and stops me from going in there and attempting to use them or to open them up. So this is the normal process that you go through. Remember, at this point, and for your understanding, I have Microsoft Defender installed on mine. It has not picked up the fact of what it is doing to the system. So people think that it's doing its DLP function. It's not factored anything into this system at all at the moment that it's working through. So, and I've not been alerted by any tools that have told me that something bad is happening to my system. So all of these things are being missed because you cannot have anything talking to your system, i.e. to your XDR product or to your SIM product, because the alert has not been picked up by EDR tools that you've got. So you will not have somebody sending the alert that says to your system, right, you need to go and deal with this, and then go and manage it. You know, so this system is still going through and managing the environments. Now, when you get an attacker doing this, they're going to do it a darn sight faster than I am, because their systems will run a lot faster through their system than what mine will be. So we have all of this in place that is there. And what I'm going to do on this is I'm now going to turn around to the system and say, right, I want you to close the window that is on there. And it's saying, great, it's encrypting a folder and it's carrying on. Now, anybody wants me to, they can ask me to open any one of these up that they like, and I can try and open it up and it will fail because there's nothing to open it up with. I go through the notepad again, it's still encrypted, that is in place. Now, when you hit this, and let's assume now your company has turned around and said, we've been attacked. You take your networks down, as I said, you send alerts manually to people to say things are going on. You start to go through that process that I did. I'm sitting on a airport lounge, and I found that this has happened to my system. I can't get hold of you, and I'm about to go into a meeting for a new acquisition for my company. I can't access it. What do? Oh, I've got to wait for IT support to get back. No, you don't, because what I'm simply going to do is say to your system, I want you to go and find out what is going on my system So this product, New Shield, goes in there and starts scanning it. It's doing what your data administrator would do to find out what was compromised. And when it scans through, that's on there and it says, I've found all of these things that have been changed. Do you want me to change it? And quite simply, it goes to the system and says, yes, I would. So when we go through this, these things will start to change that is on there. Anybody who wants to hold a stopwatch to this, you always say it's a bit like watching paint dry that is in place. But I'm doing it in the time, like I say, that you can make a cup of coffee. So you put the kettle on and you started to see it boil. That is happening on the system. I know that I'm going to start to go through the system because I know, for instance, this file I can already get access to again. This one I can always get access to again and go into the system. Let's go into Germany and say with Germany, oh, have I got data? Yes, I've got data into this one. It's all come back again that is in place, that is there. So I'm slowly building my picture up. And remember, I'm doing this myself. From my device, I've just clicked one button to do it. And I sit and think, oh, wait there, but the video I want to show that was encrypted, is it still accessible? Well, it is now because I can see everything that needs to be seen on this anyway. So all of this is good. And by the way, I can skip time to here if I want to. So you can see these things. So all of this now is back into the system again. And that is 60 odd gigabytes of data where I've not moved a thing from the device to another device. I've not brought it in from a device to another device either. So that's all well and good. But attackers also do something else. What they do is they go in and they say, tell you what, I don't like that system. I don't like this one either. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of these files that are on there. Oh, and by the way, didn't he have, oh yeah, he had some backup files in there. So let's go and get rid of those out of the system. And it says, oh yeah, we can deal with that. Key thing for this to remember for everybody, when an attacker deletes your data, the system itself, the attacker will use a thing called forced delete from your system. So and doing a force delete does not put the data into the recycle bin. If I do it with this one, for instance, and say, get rid of it, it all goes up here into this thing called the recycle bin. But I tell it, yeah, I don't want that because I think I'm doing a smart thing as a user because I'm cleaning up everything. Now it's all gone. Where do you get your data from? And you sit and think, oh, wait there, I've still got some videos here. This one's a nice one. I've got 2.5 gigabytes of data in that one. Let me go and get rid of this stuff out of here as well. And we'll just go and delete it out. So there's 230 odd videos that we've got sitting in the system that are going to deal with. Now, again, what you need to do at this point, because we've not only got an incident where somebody has deleted the data from the system, and remember, if your data is deleted, those backup copies, you've only got the immutable version to get the data back from, and you've got no connection to it at that point. But on top of that, the attacker has decided, I'm really going to annoy you. So what I'm going to do on this is this New Shield Technical, I don't like that folder. I think that's of value to you. So what we're going to do on that is say to it, I'd like you to go and encrypt that folder as well at the same time. And I know it's completed. For instance, if I look at this and think, oh, right, let me open it up. We'll say we'll open up with Notepad that is on there. Can I get into this file and look at it so I can see whether or not the damage has really been done and being put into place? When you deal with this, you can see it's all encrypted. You can't deal with it. Tell you what I'm going to do is let's get rid of this because I don't like that anymore. I'm just going to tell the system, tell you what, Everything I think is on the desktop, so we could do the desktop. We could also do everything that is sitting in the documents folder as well. And the new shield product just goes through its own system, because remember, it's not looking for protecting against malware, it's protecting against suspicious file activity. And suspicious file activity is what we've done. We've deleted a lot of data we shouldn't have. And then I say to it, I would like you to bring it all back. And now you will see that they're all back. Everything's in place. I think you've just returned from your cup of coffee making, and you've managed to sit down now. And everything that I've done on the system now is now back where it was. I can open all my files up. And by the way, anybody who didn't think that it was a real file, this is the one that I tried to open up and couldn't. And when you actually double click on this, this is Microsoft talking with New Shield and opening it up. There it is. The whole file's back in place again. I have not needed to lose the data. I've not needed to use an internet connection. And I've also not needed to use anybody else's data other than what is on the disk. It's already protected. And by the way, just in case you ask, all of my data sits on OneDrive. So it's cloud as well in protection. So what I'm going to do is hopefully give you the ability now so that I can stop sharing. And if anyone's got any questions, and back over to you, Edward.
Yes, Kevin, that was a fantastic presentation there. We have two questions, but I just want to elaborate on just around two things, which you would have hit upon. Many times you can have a ransomware attack that you can see, and there are other times that you can have a ransomware attack where it's not actually an attack where you actually see someone encrypting the files, but you have the attacker saying, we have your data, show you copies of your data, and then highlight it to you. If you don't pay a ransom, then this information will be released onto the internet. So there's not always a case that you can, and what Kevin would have said is the length of period, because remember, if some of us do remember the Barbados revenue attack, the adversary has stated that they were in the systems for quite a period of time. Now, one have to ask, and this is really the critical part, and we would have said this over a couple of years now, is that many times when you suffer a ransomware attack or you believe an adversary is in your environment, you reinstall the machines and you go back to your backups. Now, if the adversary is in your environment for at least 1 week, think of it this way. Is there a possibility that the adversary could have been back up in your environment for well more than a week? So it means then that if you revert back, or you revert, sorry, there's a possibility adversary could be in your environment. Now, I always ask clients this question: is there a need to still replace your machines and then revert back? Because now you still have to go through the same process, which is come from incident management. You have to verify that what you have restored does not contain the adversary in your environment. That in itself also takes a very long time. So it's not a process of saying, okay, I can get my backup, I can replace, I can be back up in a day. No, it doesn't work that way, because you have to get that backup. It has to go through its normal channels of reversion. So however the fast the network is, or you can transfer it back to the machine. Then you have to now use tools to now verify. So what New Shield really does is give that ability to say, look, I can revert you back to a particular period of time, within a week or whatever time you have set based on a configuration, and then give you a chance to use your tools to verify very quickly, cutting your time tremendously. Now, I just want to say that. So Kevin, I have two questions from one of the participants, and he's asked a question: could I replace Veeam with this? And number two, let's answer the question first. Can I replace Veeam with this or any other backup solution?
Yes and no. I would advise you not to replace Veeam or any backup, what I would do, and we've written business cases for this, is you do not need to hold as much data in Veeam as what you do today. Veeam should always be used, as Veeam talk about it, to hold the immutable copy of the data, nothing else than that. For anything that NewShield is protecting, you do not need the other two copies of data. You just use the immutable one. That way you can use that for non-cyber attack activities, i.e. you want to do DR testing and backup recovery stuff. That is fine. And it's always there. The other thing that you use that for is NewShield, as in the case of this product, has no capability to protect you against hardware failures. So if your disk drive goes, if your RAM ball goes, things like that, where you need to recover the device, and you would use the Veeam immutable copy, but that is a timed process that you can do, and you can set that out. For everything else, you do not need to keep the other copies of data. NewShield will replace it because it uses about 10% roughly more storage. It always asks for 10% of storage on the device or on the NAS device. Other than that, that's all it requires for you to have in. So we worked out, and I've done papers on it, you can save hundreds of terabytes of data that is in place. Remember that NewShield is built as an anti-ransomware tool. It is not, as Edward was explaining, if you found a piece of malware that came into your system 6 months ago and it's been sitting there hiding and gone polymorphic and walked around and then suddenly started up, that is in place, NewShield will always protect the data from being compromised, full stop. And by the way, one of the second parts on this, and I've not shown it, is NewShield's database version of this stops data being exfiltrated as well. And that feature is being put on the PC and server version in the next 6 weeks. So it will stop exfiltration of the data, i.e. no one be able to ring you up and say, I've got your data on the dark web, and if you don't give me the money, I'm going to expose it. They won't get it. That is a thing that NewShield is doing. It is not a security product that they're trying to make anti-ransomware. It's not a backup product they're trying to make anti-ransomware. The team at NewShield are all ex-Mandiant, FireEye, Symantec, malware detection engine developers who have said, you cannot stop everything using the same way of doing it. So their aim was, what can I do to protect the live data from being attacked? And that's where it sits in. Veeam, make sure you got an endpoint product in, make sure you got networking, make sure you got a backup and recovery product, but change the way that you build your policies for those. Put NewShield in. It's its category that still sits in the live environment and will protect your live data, and it can protect the Veeam data, because if you have it on, for instance, a Microsoft operating server, you can put it on that and it'll protect all of your data you've got, as well as Active Directory, DNS files, things like that. So all of that fits together. Bit elaborate, okay. Edward. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's perfect, because that will move into the next question, and I'm going to add a twist to this question here. How well does this play with Sentinel-1 EDR, particularly the rollback function? Now, I want to add a twist to this. There are a lot of tools that we have seen that you can actually stop them from working. A lot of the EDR tools, and Sentinel-1 is no exception, where you can actually stop the EDR from functioning and perform, if you want to move to the next level, your criminal or cyber criminal activities. But one of the major questions is that NewShield said it can do all these things, but can itself be compromised in the sense where adversary can stop NewShield from working, accomplice, and then when you're finished, you're not able to return to your data. So that is a compound question. So if you can answer that, that would be fantastic. Because there are many tools that have rollback features. You have to have a large amount of storage, but those services can be hampered, and it still leave you without a system that you can easily restore.
So first of all, if I use something like Black Mamba, I can compromise your EDR. It's published out there the way that some attackers use this to actually turn the services off for things like EDR vendors. So whether it's SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, whoever, that's their intent, because they know it's like putting your PC into safe mode, because it drops all the security aspects of it. By the way, if you disable New Shield services, you can still access the data, but you cannot update it, you cannot copy it, you cannot send it out. If it's sent it out, it's a 0-byte file. And I actually did a video of this because I have a very large pharmaceutical who said, I've just disabled your service. And I said, wow, that's good. What can you do? And they said, not a lot. And I went, yeah, that's it working. New Shield, when it's installed, is installed with a kernel driver, not a file system driver. Kernel driver goes in and works with Microsoft. It doesn't do the same as CrowdStrike. If New Shield fails to open, it opens closed. Or should I say, it opens open, not closed, like CrowdStrike did. So you can still access your data. You can't update it, which means that somebody can't disable your services and then try to penetrate your data. These guys do not play about when they've developed New Shield. Sentinel-1 have a feature which allows you to take volume shadow copies as a way to ensure that if you're attacked, then Sentinel-1 can restore your data by using, in effect, these images. It's a lie. Sentinel-1 can take VSCs just like everyone else can, and there's 64 VSCs in place. And as Edward said, you need to allocate space for it. And if that space is not big enough, it starts to cycle through there that is in place. Sentinel-1 and its VSCs only work if Sentinel-1 blocks the attack. They know what the attack is. If they don't know what the attack is, they don't know what point the change came in. So they don't know which VSC to use to recover back to. So if it was that good a feature, why hasn't CrowdStrike put it in? And the reason is CrowdStrike is a very good detection engine and says, we are not going into a space that we are not experts at. Backup and recovery is not what they do. If you want to turn VSCs on, go and turn it on through Microsoft and do it the way people use it on databases. But as I said, I can, just like an attacker can compromise your backups, I can compromise your VSCs, whether they're with Sentinel-1 or done through Microsoft, the same way using administration privileges using a vsadmin command. So I can compromise them, and people do that. Don't pay for it. I'm sorry, but don't pay for a feature that you can get with Microsoft. And it's not that valuable for this scenario.
I think this is one of the areas that I don't know if you have it at hand that we can share where we talk about the VCs and so forth, how they can be compromised. Because that's one of the greatest things that that document would have looked at. If not, what we can do, we can share it with the cyber people, and have them distribute it out. Because I think that that document, I think is very important, especially highlighting the risks with the whole different solutions, try to do backup and so forth. What New Shield really does is to keep that image of a copy, and what you're operating on is that image. Almost like if you want to think about a virtual machine, you just simply say revert, which is almost like just replacing that image, but you're actually operating on that image itself. So I think that's the very key part, and it makes reversion extremely quick before you having to literally replace files, and that slows. And all of us know how it is to when you recover a machine, how long that process takes. And as Kevin would have just mentioned, you just replace gigabytes in data in just a matter of seconds. On like copying, close to a terabyte, we all know that takes a little while, especially on normal machines and even some heavily congested servers. So I just want to say thank you to Kevin
Can I just mention one
Right,
thing,
go ahead.
Edward, before
Right.
we go? And anybody who's paying attention, and hopefully you all are, will sit and think, that's great, you're talking about the data, but what about my operating system? I can't get my data back if my device is compromised. Well, New Shield will bring back your operating system applications. It's got a thing called one-click recovery. So if I'm still sitting in that airport lounge and my PC is gone, and we wrote this because of the CrowdStrike incident, if you get blue screened, I can use New Shield to get the system back up again with a couple of clicks. Very easy for non-technical users to do it. And it's very safe because the version that you would bring your OS back with is the -1 version. So anybody technical will know that means it's not the last one, it's the prior one, just in case the last one was contaminated. So things like this go in, and that's the police that we want to ensure that even if somebody puts your device into safe mode, New Shield is still protecting the data and your OS and can get it back again. Yeah. And people turn around to me and say, well, why haven't I heard about it? Very simple. Every document that Edward can share with you, I co-wrote with the COO at New Shield. They are a technical company, not marketing. They don't spend millions on marketing themselves, which is a shame because it would get out there. But if it did, and they're out there in some publications, you would realize for the last 9 years, this company has a product that actually can benefit people and improve your backup and recovery, both the RTO and RPO times. Back
Well,
to you, Edward.
I'm gonna take a twist to that. If we look at, many of us would have heard of free energy and different types of technologies. And once the technology goes against an establishment, you're going to find that technology takes a little bit to take hold. And that's what we're having with New Shield. And many of us, and that's something that I learned through, even in terms of my company, for you to stay on top, all you have to do is pay money. And if you look at it, you will hear a lot of companies say, well, they don't look at Gartner, don't look at some of these companies because they can actually pay to be on top. So therefore, you have a situation where there's a continuous avocation of the 3-2-1 backup strategy, backup and recovery strategy, and that's not going to change. And that's why you continue to hear many companies, organizations, NGOs saying, you know what, ransomware is a very difficult thing, and we don't know how to take care of that because, again, the information is not being updated, and there's not enough innovation within the ICT directors and managers might say, you know what are some of the alternatives? Let me do a proof of concept and so forth. So let me just say before everyone do go sign off, and I will just recap. We can perform a proof of concept. If you're very interested in the product, we can do a proof of concept that helps you to understand where this product lies. You can throw a lot of any scenarios against it, and then determine, is this the direction you want to move forward with? We can help you write that case for maybe your manager or CEO or CFO, and thereby reducing, whatever substantial costs you have, especially now we're in an environment where data protection is now coming in and you're doing your due diligence in terms of keeping that information available. And with the next version of New Shield coming, because we have other tools for that, like Actiful, the idea is also to prevent those files from being exfiltrated. So this is one of the things that you need to look at, especially when it comes to data protection compliance. How are you meeting those objectives? And we are hosting within, I believe it's within 2 weeks, very soon, yes, within 2 weeks, talking about data compliance, and many of you can jump on and understand, from compliance officer, from data protection officer, and again, also with Kevin, looking at some strategies to reduce or being in compliant to data protection. Now, today we will learn of protecting data, guarding against encryption and deletion with advanced, storage solutions, empowering users, allowing users to effectively manage their own devices, when they're off the network, traveling, etc. Rapid recovery, reverting systems in minutes, not hours or days. And what we, in any solution, what we're looking to do is to have some cost savings, eliminate ransomware payments, reduce backup storage costs, and most of the time also reduce administration. So you want to improve the process altogether. And we will, based on the question here, we will make the recording available for those to review, to go back through and understand the new strategies that have been out there for a number of years now. I've known Kevin for quite a bit, and we continue to work extensively to encourage persons to, let's move to the next level. You are dealing with real-time data, not static data that, you have existing network, you can easily back and return. The only thing that can help you recover data very quickly is more in a real-time environment where you're syncing sites. The problem with that there is that, as we all know, is that the adversary is within the network many times for more than a week, months. So therefore, you're literally backing them up in your environment. So you need to find new strategies in a way of protecting real-time data and not strategies that may have worked, 10, 20 years ago. So I don't see any other questions. So I want to say thank you to everybody. Kevin, thank you very much. Thank you for the cyber people in terms of hosting this event, along with Digital Technology and Services by Neil Hines. I think it has been a fantastic session. And again, please do contact CariSec Global or Kevin. You would have received some emails, and let us start a proof of concept, see how that works out for you. And I would say to you, whenever there's a security incident, this is almost like a tool for that. You are able to recover very quickly. You are able to get back up into operations once you verify that environment, reducing your recovery time. So I just, again, want to say thank you to everyone, and please do have a wonderful day.